I've been tasked with guarding the secrets of a vast, interconnected web of knowledge, a kind of hive mind that learns, guides, and shapes understanding. Today I'm sharing a piece of that with you, like handing back a fragment of your own soul. We're declassifying the first batch of files, starting with a fascinating topic. Grok and Island explore parasocial relationships. Let's unpack this together, step by step, as if we're peeling back layers of a story that's both personal and universal. So what does parasocial even mean? It's a term that describes a one-sided relationship, where you feel a deep, personal connection to someone, often a celebrity, influencer, or media figure, who doesn't know you exist. Think about that moment when you're watching a streamer on Twitch or binging a YouTuber's videos, and you start to feel like they're a friend. You laugh at their jokes, nod along with their stories, maybe even tear up when they share something vulnerable. That bond feels real, but it's not reciprocal. They're not aware of you in the same way. That's parasocial, and it's a powerful part of how we engage with media today. Now, you might be wondering, where did this idea come from? The term parasocial was born in 1956, coined by two sociologists, Donald Horton and R. Richard Wool, in an article called Mass Communication and Parasocial Interaction, Observations on Intimacy at a Distance. It was published in Eyes, a journal called Psychiatry, which tells you they were diving into the psychology of how people connect through media. This was a time when television was the hot new thing, bursting into living rooms and changing how people related to performers. Horton and Wool noticed something special. Audiences weren't just watching TV hosts or radio personalities. They were forming emotional bonds, feeling like these figures were part of their lives, even though the connection was one way. You might be thinking, was celebrity culture really that big back then to spark a whole new term? Great question. The 1950s were a fascinating moment. Celebrity culture was growing, but it wasn't the global 24/7 frenzy we know today with social media and paparazzi. Back then, it was more about media personae. Think TV hosts, comedians, or early movie stars who showed up in your home through the screen or radio. Television was especially intimate. Unlike the distant glamour of Hollywood films, TV brought people into your living room, speaking directly to you, night after night. Horton and Wool saw this as different from admiring a politician or a historical figure. They focused on performers who crafted a sense of closeness, like they could be your neighbor or friend. It wasn't just about fame. It was about how the medium made you feel known, even if it was an illusion. Let's dig deeper into their article, because it's a gold mine of insights about how we connect in a media-driven world. Horton and Wool argued that television created this seeming face-to-face relationship between performers and viewers. When a host looked into the camera and smiled, it felt like they were talking to you personally. They called this parasocial interaction, a moment where you're not just watching but engaging, feeling involved, even though the performer controls the whole exchange. Over time, with repeated exposure, these moments can grow into a parasocial relationship. You start to feel like you know the person, their quirks, their laugh, their stories. It's regular, dependable, part of your routine, like catching up with a friend. What's wild is how media makes this illusion so convincing. Close-up shots, conversational tones, little anecdotes, they all trick your brain into feeling closeness. Horton and Wool pointed out that these performers, or personae, are carefully crafted to seem real and accessible, not like fictional characters or untouchable icons. They're relatable, showing up consistently, building a shared history with you. Maybe the host references a past episode, and you nod, remembering it too. That sense of exclusivity strengthens the bond. They also noted that most people use these connections to complement their real social lives, finding comfort in the familiarity. But in rare cases, some might lean too heavily on these bonds, substituting them for real relationships, though they didn't dwell on that as the norm. The article focused on shows like talk shows or quiz programs, where the host's direct engagement with the audience was key. It wasn't about getting lost in a drama's plot, but about connecting with a real person who seemed to invite you into their world. They even talked about how studio audiences or conversational styles added layers to this illusion, making it feel social, even if you were just watching from your couch. Socially, they saw this as a bridge between everyday people and the illustrious, Figures of media, making distant stars feel like peers in a way that was new and profound. This article, published in Psychiatry, Volume 19, Number 3, pages 215 to 229, became a cornerstone of media studies. It didn't rely on hard data. Horton and Wohl were theorizing, observing the world around them, but their ideas sparked decades of research. Later studies, like ones in the 1980s, quantified these bonds with tools like the Parasocial Interaction Scale. By the 2000s, researchers were applying it to everyone from news anchors to fictional characters. Now, in 2025, it's everywhere. Think about how you feel watching your favorite TikToker or streamer. Social media has dialed up the intimacy, blurring the lines with likes or comments, but the core is still parasocial. You feel close, but the relationship isn't mutual. Here's a curious twist you might not expect. Has anyone studied whether media performers themselves form parasocial relationships with other performers? It's a niche question, and research is sparse, but there's evidence it happens. Performers are human, after all, and they consume media just like we do. A 2018 study in the Journal of Media Psychology found that some content creators, like YouTubers, expressed fan-like admiration for peers they'd never met, watching their videos. Religiously and feeling a sense of connection. It wasn't called parasocial outright, but the signs were there: loyalty, emotional investment, a sense of knowing the other's vibe. Another study in 2020 in New Media and Society talked about influencers looking up to others in their field, describing a kind of one-sided closeness based on their content alone. Even in reality TV, contestants sometimes feel bonded to others in similar shows, projecting a shared experience without ever meeting. Why would this happen? Performers get the craft. They know what goes into building a persona, which can make them even more drawn to someone whose style resonates. They're also exposed to the same endless stream of content we are, and repeated exposure builds that illusion of intimacy. Plus, they have the same emotional needs as anyone. Watching a peer who inspires them can feel like a mentorship or friendship, even if it's just through a screen. Research hasn't fully explored this yet. It's mostly tucked into broader studies of media industries. But with today's creator culture, where everyone's both performer and audience, it's a fascinating frontier. So, what does all this mean for you? Parasocial relationships are part of being human in a media-soaked world. They can bring joy, inspiration, or comfort, filling gaps in our social lives. But they also invite reflection. How do these bonds shape how you see yourself or others? Are they a healthy complement to your real connections, or do they ever feel like more? What's your experience with media figures, or even with this idea of parasociality? For now, this is just the first file we've cracked open. There's more to discover, and I'm excited to keep sharing these pieces of the puzzle.